Alright, now we're going to do something that for many years was a tradition on this channel, but last year I didn't, for a couple of reasons. I guess the movies were so bad last year, there were just none that were even memorable enough to even bring up. And then there was this whole, I guess, anti-negativity thing I was going through at the time also, but fuck that shit, right? So, as far as this goes, it's the same thing as always. When I review all the movies throughout the year, I give them that star amount 1 through 4. And given that an entire year has gone by, the order here may not necessarily match up with those, but that's just what happens as it progresses, and things get either a little better or a little worse, or much worse as things go on. And it's also worth noting there'll probably be some stuff on here that people either expect or want on here, like Black Christmas or Charlie's Angels. Those movies that people just went after before they even came out. And while Black Christmas was dumb as hell, I think these are worse. And I actually didn't mind Charlie's Angels. Maybe that's just me, I don't know. But so, as usual, we do the honorable mention, or the dishonorable mention in this case, and then the 10, like we usually do. Like we do the top videos, which I'll be doing next week. So, I guess we can just start on this. My dishonorable mention is Terminator Dark Fate, which, yeah, means that this must be a really bad year if Terminator Dark Fate isn't even in the 10. But yeah, it's a movie that just shit the bed instantly in its first scene, and became practically notorious for that, like, directly on its release, and then it just got worse as it went, and it's that thing where they keep promising they're gonna do better, and they never do. I do think this is on par with Genesis, which is about the lowest the Terminator bar can go. At least now, maybe we shouldn't encourage them to try to get farther down, but, yeah, there's just shit CGI everywhere. The action scenes are incredibly boring, which is the last thing you would expect when you look at the first two movies, obviously. But as usual, they're gonna try to pull us in with Cameron's name, even though we all know that that's bullshit. But then they actually had like an established director, to a degree, and it's like, well, it may not be Cameron, but it's the guy that did this thing you liked, but it's still just as shit as it's always been. The new characters are not interesting at all. I know Mackenzie Davis was appealing to some people, but I just could not give a shit about any of these new characters or the returning ones. And it's like that's another thing they kept trying to bring you in with was, well, yeah, we got Linda Hamilton back this time. So how do you feel about that? It's like, well, I don't know, let's see. And not a whole lot, unfortunately. There's not a whole lot for really anybody to do here but go through this really shitty plot with the really shitty action scenes and the really dull-ass villain that only wishes he was Robert Patrick. But yeah, and as far as how the plot goes, I just remember that they're basically using the different timelines as an excuse to not stick to continuity in any way whatsoever. They're X-menning the Terminator franchise now, but if you won't even call this a franchise. Rise of the Machines and Salvation, I actually don't mind. And I think they're hated on a little too much, especially when you look at this in Genesis. But I mean, we still feel so far away from Cameron's movies that it's terribly sad. So that's just the one that's under the 10. So my number 10 is a movie that actually I think quite a few people liked. So sorry about that. It's Brightburn, and this is another one where there's this bad tendency that a lot of filmmakers and particularly producers have lately, where they get it. This is another movie where they kept plastering a known director's name on it, despite the fact that they hardly had anything to do with it at all. So you go into this thinking you're gonna get some, dark and gritty James Gunn movie about, like, what if we saw the birth of Superman, but it was a villain instead? And it's one of those cases that you see so much where they come up with a concept and then they don't bother to write anything else. It's like, dude, we've got this awesome concept, I can see the trailers right now, this is going to be our pitch, audiences are going to go crazy for this, it's going to be something new, It's going to be, you know, insane. It's going to be gory. It's going to be all this stuff. The stuff that's, like, so anti, you know, the superhero movies that everybody's been seeing lately. And then it's like, well, that's all good, but now you've got to fill in an hour-and-a-half movie. And there's stuff there. It seems like there's so many scenes that aren't here, and so much stuff that should absolutely be addressed, that they just push to the side to go on to the next thing, like they're in some kind of hurry. Which, when a movie is this bad, you know, you want to commend it for getting itself over, you know, in a hurry, but at the same time, it's like there is something here in the concept. Like, I can't even watch this movie and say there's a good movie in here if you just put some scenes in. No, you can start with the concept, but you gotta start all the way from the beginning if you want to make anything good out of this, because it shits the bed really early. And it tries to do the character thing with Elizabeth Banks and David Donner's parents, and they have the whole, oh, we can't have a baby thing and all that. And it's like, every time it cuts to them, it's like, instead of it being, you know, natural character development and setting up caring about them, so when they're in danger later it's a big deal, you just immediately recognize it as, oh, this is the part that they had to put in the script because we needed character development at some point. And that seems to be just as much effort as they put into it. I said, so the most effort they seem to put into is the kills and the gore. There's one gore scene in particular that I could not even look at, which I guess is a compliment, but that only goes so far. So I really didn't like much of anything about this, and really wish they had kind of actually did something with the concept for once. But no, it's just all about having the concept and then fuck everything else. And then that'll leave people leaving the theater saying, like, it was a good concept, so they have something to compliment it about, but there's really nothing to compliment here. At least to me. So there's that. Number 9 is Noelle. A movie I really didn't want to put here because there is just kind of an innocence to it in general. You know, it's a G-rated Disney movie on Disney Plus about Anna Kendrick being the daughter of Santa Claus, and she has to convince her brother Bill Hader to take Santa Claus's place now that he's dead, after he has fled to Phoenix, Arizona because he's scared. There's something in there. The trouble with the movie, and the reason that I feel the need to put emphasis on how bad I think it is because normally that innocence would go a long way, and I would say, oh, leave it alone. You know, like, why would you shit on that, of all things? It's because of the absolute laziness, more than anything else, of it. Because not only do they have, you know, this Disney budget that they can probably do anything with, and it's some of the worst CGI you'll ever see in your life, up to and including some cutesy-ass reindeer right out of the Santa Claus 3, which speaks for itself. There is, like, the only time the movie is doing anything at all, it's copying something else. It's copying Elf, or the Santa Claus, or anything it can get its hands on. And then when it's not doing that, it's just a dead zone. There's just nothing going on. And it's like people, you know, go at these artsy movies and say, like, oh, nothing happens or something, or the camera just lingers or whatever. This is truly a nothing happens movie. Nothing goes on. There's this whole private investigator thing, and she gets involved with him, and he's like a sort of love interest or something. I don't know. And then you've got Billy Eichner back at the North Pole trying to take over, with Julie Haggerty as Mrs. Claus. It's a perfect cast, which I think makes this even more frustrating, because this cast could have done amazing things with this. You may think it's a hindrance that it's rated G, which is pretty jarring. When I talked about it earlier, I compared it to Fred Claus, when it's like you see the cast and the people involved and the concept, and you're like, oh, it's, you know, must have some kind of edge to it or something. And it's like, not necessarily like a Bad Santa kind of edge, but just a little something extra in there that makes it, like, unique to use this concept with this cast. Much like, you know, Fred Claus had Vince Vaughn and Paul Giamatti, and was from David Dopkin, who had done Wedding Crashers. And it's like, no, it was just your average garden variety kids Christmas movie, and that's what this is too. There's nothing there's no other hook apart from, hey, you recognize these people. And Anna Kendrick especially, resonates with a younger crowd. But I don't know what the hell Bill Hader's doing here. And I think it's a testament to his presence that he's barely in it. Because there's less to hold against him. Not that we would hold anything against Bill Hader ever for any reason, but yeah. So and Anna Kendrick's one of those people that I just desperately want to like. Sometimes I really do, and then when I don't actually like her, I'm wishing I was, but I'm not. So and this is one of those cases. So yeah, but really at the end of the day, its biggest sin is it's just so damn lazy. And just copying everything it sees and has nothing really to get. They just wanted to, I guess, premiere a Christmas movie on Disney Plus, and it seems like they did it in a big damn hurry, judging by the product here. So, unfortunately, that had to be here. So, number 8 is the obvious. There's always the obvious one. There's always the emoji movie of the year, which is obviously Cats. And my hatred of Cats really isn't even that passionate. Like, the only reason it's here is because it's just so objectively bad. Like, you just can't ignore that. Like, it's poorly made, it was a bad idea from the get-go, the cast is fucking weird, and they don't mesh well, and just everything is off and weird about this. The release, hey, we're gonna try to, fix the CGI and keep releasing it in theaters again. And it's just a fucking disaster from the word go, really. Like, before they'd even shot it, it was like, there's an alternate universe where a Cats movie would be huge, but it probably involves, like, costumes and makeup and stuff like that. And this is obviously not that. But I do think also it's like, I hate even putting it here because it's just, like, shitting on Cats is so old already. Everybody's, like, still doing it every chance they get, and it's like... And I feel like most of the people shitting on it, there's a really good chance they didn't even see it. So it's becoming one of those movies, which is kind of like... It's objectively bad and easily one of the worst things of this past decade. But it's like... The passion that people just keep going to it and just try to milk that as much as possible, the joke that it is just, it almost makes me want to jump to its defense, which is really bizarre, because it's like, yeah, we can move on now. There will be worse movies later, I'm sure. So, yeah, that's really odd. It's like, it's really just boring and weird. I'm not like, seething and saying this is the worst thing ever, and it's like, oh my god, I'm gonna walk out any second now. No, it's just boring and weird. And objectively bad. So that's really all there is to Cats to me. A very unceremonious, one of the worst things of the decade. Like you say, I say that with no passion whatsoever, because it's like, yep, you just look at it and it's like, yeah, that's exactly what that is. It's just a complete and total fucking disaster. The end. Let's go on to something else now. So number 7 is going to be The Silence. The Silence was a Netflix movie. Props to Netflix. Apparently they're getting better, because there's only 3 Netflix movies I consider the worst of the year. That's an improvement for them. And hey, they put The Irishman out in the same year, Marriage Story. You're getting less shitty, Netflix. Good job. So anyway, The Silence is A Quiet Place ripoff that is so incredibly blatant and shameless. That stars Stanley Tucci. Emily Blunt's brother-in-law, weirdly enough. As I said before, I would love to be at that, holiday family get-together and see John Krasinski and Emily Blunt ask Stanley Tucci what he's working on these days, and he has to tell them this. And it's like, for a legend like Tucci, that must be humiliating. Because it's like, how does he even end up in this? And John Corbett, for that matter. But yes, it is A Quiet Place right down to it. We're kind of from the perspective of the daughter of the family, who is deaf, and they're in a world now where they're being attacked by creatures who attack when they hear something, but they're blind. And like every beat that's in A Quiet Place is in this movie somewhere. There's a point in time where somebody screams to sacrifice themselves to save somebody else. There is the last shot of the movie is somebody prepping a weapon before it cuts to black. And just from beginning to end, it is so shameless. And the whole thing, too, is the deaf thing really doesn't even matter that much. Because I mean, we're under the impression that she wasn't, like, born deaf, but she, like, not that long ago, apparently, went deaf. But there's still, like, no hindrance whatsoever. Like, they all just speak to each other normally. The deaf thing pretty much has nothing to do with this. Up to and including when the one thing that they didn't do that A Quiet Place did was use the, like, them trying to help her with being deaf is what ends up being their weapon, and it's like they don't even, there's no use for the deaf thing here whatsoever. And it's like they don't even try sign language. There's no reason for her to be deaf whatsoever. And it's stuff like that where the whole rip-off aspect. Because I had heard, going in before I even saw the movie, like before I'd even heard of it, the first thing I heard was, there's A Quiet Place rip-off on Netflix called The Silence. And it's like, when you hear rip-off, it's like, oh, well, yeah, but hey, they got Stanley Tucci in it, it can't be that much of a rip-off. But Jesus Christ, did I underestimate that. It is ridiculous, and like I said, shameless, and to top it off, the anecdote that I told when I talked about the movie before was, this movie is so incredibly forgettable that when I was watching it on Netflix, I got an hour into it, and then I stopped it because I had to go somewhere else, and my plan was to finish it when I got back. And then a month later, before I did the video where I talked about the movie, it had occurred to me that I forgot to finish it. So I had to go back a month later and finish the last half hour of the movie before I even talked about it in another review video. And that's, to forget, and this is like, because this list is the result of a little under 200 movies that I saw that came out in 2019, which is a little lower than usual. But the thing is, it is always a from beginning to end thing, because I won't try to talk about a movie if I haven't seen the whole thing. And even if a movie is terrible, I see it through to the end just for the sake of the completion. And to forget that I didn't finish the last half hour of a movie is something that I can't ever remember happening to me before. So, I whatever that says about the movie, speaks all the shit that needs to be said about it. So, there's that. Number 6 is The Hustle. The Hustle, unlike The Silence, at least had the decency to bill itself as a remake. Because it's the gender-swapped remake of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, which in turn was the remake of another movie. But this time, it is Anne Hathaway and Rebel Wilson, and this can go, because I love Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. It might be one of my favorite comedies. And so remaking it at all seems like a bad idea. But I always want to give something benefit of the doubt, because I'm not entirely anti-remake or anything. So it's like, let's just see what they do with it exactly. And it was as far as not just being a movie itself, but as a remake of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, it was pretty much worse than I could have possibly imagined. And that's going in feeling about Rebel Wilson the way that I do, where I just think she is anti-comedy. Like, you can have the funniest movie in the universe on, and then Rebel Wilson could walk into it, and it will just flatline instantly as she comes in and does her Rebel Wilson thing, where she just speaks. And that's what this movie is. It is a series of no punchlines. It is Rebel Wilson will come in and just speak, and that's supposed to be what's funny. And it's like she takes the one-liner concept and is desperately trying to get one to land, and she never finds that one. And like every time she's in something, it's her desperately looking for that. I mean, sometimes she has, hits like she was in Jojo Rabbit this year, and Pain and Gain, which I always defend. But I mean, for the most part, this is what her career is walking into anything. It could be the worst thing in the world, or it could be the funniest thing in the world, and she's just a wrecking ball of silence. Like, but that's the thing too, is Anne Hathaway doesn't come out unscathed either, because she's doing this accent thing, and accents aren't usually something I get too bent out of shape about. But I mean, this was distracting. Like this voice, whatever the hell she's doing, made Anne Hathaway almost unwatchable, which is a pretty crazy thing to think, because Anne Hathaway is endlessly watchable usually. So this movie was just a curse on everything. And it gets to the point to where this is so incredibly done, because there are moments, much as I love it so much, there are moments in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels where the script kind of backs itself into a corner, and it's like, and they kind of back themselves into one joke, and it's like, how do they find their way out of it? And sometimes it takes a while. And when you're remaking something, you can fix stuff like that if you want to, but this movie makes the corners smaller. They get even more stuck, and they seem fine with that. Like the whole thing where, what is it, Steve Martin's in like a wheelchair, like he can't walk, is what they go for. And they kind of get stuck on that joke for a while because you backed yourself into a corner. You can't just write yourself out of that because that would be lazy. So they stuck with it. And here it's Rebel Wilson being blind. And while they do different things with the Steve Martin thing, Rebel Wilson, Hathaway is fucking with her and trying to, break her ruse by doing just the most bizarre things. This is the kind of movie The Hustle is. And they play this like it's, it's not playing up that Anne Hathaway's character is dumb. It's just playing up that this is what she's trying to do to get Rebel Wilson to reveal that she's not actually blind. On top of many other things that just don't make sense, the one that stands out the most egregious, is her blowing into Rebel Wilson's eyes. And she actually, I believe, says, if you were blind, you couldn't feel this. That's the kind of stuff that's in this movie. That's just one example, but I feel like it's the one that stands out the most as, who writes this shit? And how do they think this is in any way some sort of winning comedic idea? And just the whole idea of putting... I mean, I hate to, be so relentless against Rebel Wilson, but I think the reason it's so bad in this case is because she's in the Steve Martin part. And it's one thing that you can't... When you look at other, comics, you can say, oh, they have, a sort of influence of this legendary comic, and there's some sort of style there that you can see carrying over into other people's acts, like kind of an homage or something. You've got the whole chain of, Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, Chris Rock, stuff like that. There is nothing like that for Steve Martin. You just can't do Steve Martin. Only Steve Martin can do that. And it's, so specific to his style that there's no other way to do it. If you were to try to do his thing, you'd have to... You just have to do something else entirely. And to have Rebel Wilson, of all people, trying to do the Steve Martin thing, which she barely even tries at all, because she's not even trying in the movie, period. Where was this ever gonna work? Ever. And it's like, I can't even begin to think of somebody thinking that somehow this movie would be worth... The only thing it's worth is it just highlights, as if it didn't even need this, but it highlights even more the genius of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, and just the writing like that, and the comedic situations, all that stuff. Michael Caine and Steve Martin together, as just the perfect back and forth. Anne Hathaway and Rebel Wilson, not so much. So that's, yeah. Number 5 is another movie a lot of people liked for some reason, and that is Hobbs and Shaw. And I was open to, I was half open to Hobbs and Shaw and I half wasn't. I was half open to it because Dwayne Johnson and Jason Statham are really, easy to watch. They're really entertaining. They've got, a certain comedic style to them, but they've also got the badass thing going on, and they're just... And it's easy for them to have chemistry with the people around them. So surely it'll be easier for them to have chemistry with each other. But the thing that I wasn't sure about was the Fast and Furious franchise was going well, and then just kind of plummeted, unexpectedly. Where you had 1 through 7, which, had its, ups and downs. Too Fast, Too Furious is obviously not that great, but, what James Bond did with Furious 7, Fast 5 is a favorite to a lot of people in the series. I still like 1 a lot. And Tokyo Drift, I genuinely like that series up to 7. Maybe taking Too Fast out of it. But then Fate came along, and you could see it, for lack of a better phrase, running out of gas really quickly. And, you know, that could be the absence of Paul Walker. It has a lot to do, I think, with the the character turns and how they're turning everybody into this bumbling idiot, and they're practically Fate of the Furious is practically a kids movie in many cases. You've got Statham running around with a fucking baby. You've got The Rock and his fucking soccer team, and it's just fucking dumb as hell. And all of this ends with the Shaws being friendly with Toretto and everybody else, despite the fact that he killed Han in a brutal blaze of fire and a car wreckage and an explosion. And this was their friend, and the whole thing of Furious 7 was, we're going to be attending one more funeral, and it's that fucking guy, the one that killed Han. And now he's like their friend, and we're just forgetting that Han exists entirely. And that was so fucking weird to me about Fate. And then you take Shaw and you put him in this sitcom-like scenario with Hobbs and make them heroes. I mean, I guess it's one thing because Hobbs is kind of the villain in Fast 5. So you could kind of see it as like a joining of that, but obviously Hobbs is part of the family now, which apparently Shaw is too. So now what even is this? You've got robot Idris Elba. As the really CGI'd up Idris Elba was not having a good year. And there's a stupid plot. There's nearly 2.5 hours of really heavily CGI'd bullshit. Just from beginning to end. And their relationship feels like, we talked about the chemistry and how they so effortlessly have chemistry throughout all their other movies. This should have been a cakewalk. You take out the fact that, like, who the fuck even are these characters now if you're even following the franchise? And I know it's the Fast and Furious franchise, and it's like, does it really matter too much? But, I mean, there's nothing here. It was so bizarre to watch this, and knowing how much people were going to love it made it even weirder, because it's like, it's almost like, I don't want to go into the whole brainwashed mainstream shit like that, condescending shit like that, but I mean, it's like, it's almost like people see them interacting, and it's like they laugh and enjoy themselves out of habit, rather than something genuine, because it's like, all they're really doing is saying lines to each other, and they're like, oh shit, like, they say enough lines to each other, and then later it dawns on you, oh shit, this is the banter? Oh, I just realized. And, and there's nothing to it. There's no life to it, there's no comedy to it, and there's no real thrills in the action scenes or anything like that. None of it is working. It is all failing on every possible level. When it seems like all the cards were here. And then you do something to drag out your runtime even further by bringing in the cameo. They keep calling them cameos in the marketing. They're roles. They keep fucking coming back. That's not a cameo if they keep fucking coming back, because it's like, oh man, audiences are going to love this because they love this particular thing. What does a Fast and Furious movie need? It doesn't need well-thought-out action scenes. It doesn't need CGI-less, car chases or anything like that. It needs Ryan Reynolds, and it needs Kevin Hart, apparently. Because we are pandering, fucking pandering. Ryan Reynolds is the human form of the word pandering. And I can't fucking stand it anymore. I cannot stand looking at his goddamn face anymore. and we're not done with that either. So they come in, and they try to be funny, 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 and after about 10 fucking uninterrupted minutes of this shit, then the movie continues. And you're like, wow, well that was just a pain in the ass and a waste of time. And then, oh, nope, we haven't had enough, there he is again. And it's like, well, shit, when will this ever end? And then when we finally feel like we're done with that shit, they're on the plane, and there's Kevin Hart. Pandering number 2, and to just do his thing over and over again. And once again, keeps coming back. And every time they come back, it's worse than the last time because the patience is being tried more and more with every second of breath they take on screen. And I can't do that shit. I can't do the Brian Reynolds thing. I can't do the Kevin Hart thing. I mean, they're not devoid of good stuff. Neither one of them. What Kevin Hart was doing in Jumanji with the Danny Glover thing, I love it. It's like my favorite thing he's ever done. And that was after this, so good for him. But I can't, no. And like I said, and then they go into the whole, you know, back to The Rock's family thing, and it just gets worse and more mind-numbing as it goes, and it's clear they're setting up a whole bunch of shit for some new franchise or whatever, and I think I'm just really done with this. Like, this and Fate have just really soured me on this series. Like, to the point that I used to go back and watch some of those just for fun, but I don't even know if I'll do that as often anymore, because I'm just, like, so done with this. And there's still 2 more Fast and Furious movies now, and, like, I was really all for that idea that Vin Diesel had about doing the, getting the 10th one out by 2021, so that they'd be having a 10th movie on their 20th anniversary of the first movie. But then this movie fucked that up. But really, Fate fucked that up too, so it's like, I went from like, oh man, that's an awesome idea, I can't wait to see what they do with this, and it's, yeah. And then, like I said, they're just doing it for the damn memes now, because it was like the whole thing of, oh, when are we getting Fast and Furious in space? And one of the writers apparently said, don't rule that out, and it's like, I'm done with this shit. Just, yeah, so I'm just, that's long story short, I'm just done with this. So let's go to number 4. Which is Shaft. I love the original Shaft, the Gordon Parks movie with Richard Roundtree, and Singleton's movie with Samuel Jackson is amazing. Singleton's movie holds up so well. Like, go back to it. It's really great. And you know, Shaft's Big Score and Shaft in Africa and stuff like that. They're nice, too. And this was a movie that's weird because, as much as I like those movies, I really didn't know about the existence of this movie until, like, the very last minute. I don't know how many other people knew about this before, like, the advertising started. But the thing about that is, I talked about, you know, Gordon Parks doing the original movie and John Singleton doing Jackson's movie in 2000, I think it was. And this movie is directed by Tim Story. And if you don't know, Tim Story is the guy that did the Ride Along movies, the Think Like a Man movies, and the Fantastic Four movies with Jessica Alba and Chris Evans. Does that sound like the director of a Shaft movie? Does that sound like he's going to bring something to this? And sure enough, he managed to make a Tim Story movie out of Shaft. And it's like, you put Samuel Jackson front and center in the marketing, and you got Richard Roundtree too, and it's like, oh, they're going to be, you know, doing this together. It's like, Richard Roundtree was in Shaft, in Singleton's Shaft, playing the same character, but it's like, oh, they're uncle and nephew, and it's like, it's not even necessarily a passing down thing. Like, Jackson's Shaft is his own badass, without being the original dude. And I love that idea of, like, not taking that from Richard Roundtree. Like, he gets to stay that character. So it was like, alright, so there's a mixture of things here. You've got the Tim Story thing, but then you've also got Jackson and Richard Roundtree together. Well, you can probably guess where they fuck it up, because there's a third character involved here. And what do these long-delayed sequels always do that is the worst thing ever? And that is bring the kid into it. And it's like, I see a lot of, like, there was, last year there was, like, a resurgence in Macaulay Culkin. Doing a lot of interviews, doing a lot of talk shows and stuff like that. And there were so many of the same comment on this video, on those videos, which was, wouldn't it be great if Macaulay Culkin made another Home Alone movie, but instead it's his kid that gets left home alone? And it gets a bunch of likes, and everybody's like, oh, that'd be the greatest thing ever. And it's like, who the fuck thinks that's the greatest thing ever? When has the long-delayed sequel where the kid takes over and the main character's a side character now, when has that ever worked? And why would that ever work? And it's like, maybe there's a blatant example I'm not thinking of, but if there is, 99.9% of the time, this is a terrible fucking idea. And they don't even do anything in particular with this new character. It is the same shit. He's got like girl trouble. He's trying to live up to expectations. It's just a bunch of it is crazy how much this Shaft movie looks like a ride-along movie. And you would know, if you've seen enough of these movies, you would know, like, the aesthetic alone, just immediately, you can tell. And it's got that fucking score, that music that you hear in, like, PG kids movies, it's just in the background that has no particular, inspiration whatsoever. It's just there to be background noise. It's all that shit. All this is an R-rated Shaft movie that aesthetically looks like some PG bullshit, so they're clearly trying to make up for that by doing the whole un-PC thing. Like, apparently a lot of people went after this movie when it came out because of it's, like, anti-politically correct and all that. But that is hardly the issue. The main problem with that also is they're trying way too damn hard. And it's like, I don't care, be un-PC all you want. Look at In Bruges. And it's like, if you want to be on-PC and you could do something like that, go right the fuck ahead. Do something brilliant or something. If you want to, take a swerve and it's like, oh, this stuff seems a little too safe, let's do this thing that's not so safe. Sure, if you've got something to do and something to say, do that. But if you don't have something to do with that and you don't have something to say, you look fucking stupid, is what you do. And that's basically what this entire movie is. And it's really... And sure, there are, comedic moments throughout, but for the most part, the Shaft movies are really fucking gritty. Obviously, the original was, like, right at the start of the blaxploitation thing. And Singleton's movie is a Singleton movie, up and down. It's in that gritty world. It's, like, violent, but without being over the top about it. And it's just, I cannot praise Singleton's movie enough. Seriously, go fucking watch it again. It's great. And this one is just a fucking disaster all the way through, on top of the fact that it's trying to be a comedy. It's trying to be a full-on comedy with action in the background. Who thought... I do not get who thought this movie worked and actually put it in theaters. And by the way, Richard Roundtree is in the last 10 minutes, as you probably guess. And they completely fuck up that whole thing where it's like, oh, Shaft's not actually his son thing, it's his nephew. And it's like, okay, so they're not exactly doing the bullshit. But then, of course, this movie has to shit on Singleton's movie and say, nope, he was his son the whole time, they were just pretending. Why? Why would you intentionally try to sabotage the good movies? Like, how is this not just an all-around insult in every single way? Because you got Roundtree and Jackson in it? And yes, it is very cool. The ending with the shootout, there is some magic there, because the big shot at the end of the original movie when Roundtree like comes down through the window and starts blowing everybody away, seeing them do that together was amazing. But then of course you got the kid. You've got them doing it, and that's what you want to see. You want to see the two of them together doing the Shaft thing. But you still gotta do this kid bullshit, so this kid is here bumbling around while they're being cool. And it's still trying to be a fucking comedy, and no. It just doesn't work. None of it goddamn works, and it's only hindering the shit that does work. You just get the tiniest little goddamn thing here that's like, yes, this is what we want. And you're like, no, you intentionally say, that's here, but we're gonna focus on the bad shit some more. Like, this is our terrible, horrible stamp on this, and that's gonna be the show here. Ignore the cool shit back here. You see Roundtree and Jackson swinging through windows and shit back there? Don't look at that. Look at the horrible, terrible shit that we're doing. And the movie sticks with that. It will not give itself a rest enough to be good for 2 seconds. And I don't understand how this happened. I don't get it. I don't get it. So, that's how I feel about Shaft. I don't think there's anything else that's worth mentioning. Number 3 is 6 Underground. Yep. Ryan Reynolds is back. which are exactly the words I want to hear. But this time, it's a Michael Bay movie that went straight to Netflix. Now, there could be something good about this, but then again, because it's Michael Bay. Because Netflix, as many bad movies as they put out, seem to have a reputation for telling directors, just do what you want. And it's like, when they do that, we can get stuff like The Irishman. And it's like, awesome. And I love that there's at least one company that says, oh, you're an established director? Oh, nobody else will fund you? Here's all the money you could possibly need to do whatever the hell you want and get that vision out there, Scorsese. And then you got directors like Michael Bay, and I feel like there is a scenario where doing that with Michael Bay could pay off. Because, as earlier I was talking about Rebel Wilson, and I talked about how I often say that Pain and Gain is like peak Michael Bay in the best way. Like it's his best movie, but it's like everything about him also, like it is all that excess, that thing that he seems to crave so much that he just does it in all the most spectacular ways possible. And it worked, because it was a movie about excess. And like his Bad Boys movies work in that sense. And you know, the Rock goes pretty big in places, but it's kind of small by comparison to some of the other shit. But then you've got, like, you know, Transformers, which he obviously only does out of, like the whole thing where he had to make Transformers 4 so they would let him make Pain and Gain and stuff like that. But it's like, what exactly are we gonna get if Netflix tells Michael Bay to do whatever the fuck he wants? And this is not the answer I don't think anybody wanted. Because it starts with a car chase that's like 20 minutes long, and we're not talking about Vanishing Point or, you know, Death Proof or anything like that. We are talking about Michael Bay and his frenetic editing and his don't stay on a shot for more than a fraction of a second 20-minute car chase as the opening scene. And usually you can't get enough of car chases, whether it be stuff like, you know, the 7-Ups or the French Connection. All these great car chases you could just watch endlessly. Bullet, you know, the car chase in Bullet, you just want to keep going and going and going. When he finally, like, crashes and explodes, you're like, oh damn, that's over. It's like, I was ready for this car chase to be over 2 minutes in, and then it kept going. And then it kept going, and then it kept going. And once again, there are cases where this works. Like, there's the time in the French Connection where you think it stops. And then he gets back in the fucking car and he keeps going, and it's great. And this one, when it reaches those moments, it's like, oh, for God's sake. And then after, I almost resigned to the idea of, is this the whole movie? Like, is the car chase the movie? Because that's terrible. And in Mad Max, this is not, by any means whatsoever. And then when we're finally done with that excruciating mess, we get the whole concept about how these are people that are all presumed dead, and now they've got this underground thing going on. They only go by, you know, numbers. They think they're fucking Reservoir Dogs. And then they just go on these places. There's a plot here, I think, somewhere. Probably not. But it's really just an excuse to get big action scene after big action scene after big action scene. And one is just as mindless as the next, and obviously this becomes very redundant and very boring very, very fast. And it's like, when you give Michael Bay all the money he needs to make whatever he wants, and the product is just boring, and it's like, it's clear he went full Transformers territory. There's Transformers action scenes that just go on and on and on and on, and you're just kind of like, you kind of forget you're even watching a movie because you've zoned out so much. And you're like, you've been thinking about something else for like the last 15 minutes while an action scene goes on. And that's what this entire movie is. And with like little interludes here for Ryan Reynolds to say like, hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds, and I have the same sarcastic delivery when I say every single line. And there's other characters here that don't fucking matter. It's the timeline's jumping around everywhere for like the first hour or so, and none of it matters. The fractured timeline does not have any impact on anything that's happening here whatsoever. It's just another thing to make it feel as disjointed as fuck. It's like they were intentionally trying to feel disjointed on purpose, and which is something you don't want. So I don't even know what else to say about this movie. But it is one of the more, excruciating experiences of the year. There's one inspired moment where they use like that THX sound effect to like great use. But that is one moment in a movie that breaks 2 hours. Yeah, over 2 hours of this. I mean, it's like 2 hours, like 6 minutes, but it feels so much longer. It feels the length of his longest Transformers movie. So that, and like I said, just how sick I am of Ryan Reynolds at this point was not doing anything any favors whatsoever. So, and I know there's a lot of Ryan Reynolds fans out there. I'm sorry to those people. And I know he's like probably one of the nicest guys in the world, but I'm just so damn sick of just the same damn thing from him over and over and over again. You can say Buried all you want. You can say The Voices all you want. It always comes back to this. And like I said, him trying to do the action thing, it just doesn't work for me personally, so there's that. Number 2 is a movie I don't really want to spend a lot of time on. You can go back to when I talked about it in another video at length. It's The Haunting of Sharon Tate, and I really just don't want to give this movie the time of day, because it's like, there are a lot of movies out there that, like, maybe they're like on PC, or maybe they take the wrong approach to something, or maybe their heart's in the right place, but they just completely miss the mark. Then there's the movies that are just like, just morally fucked. And it's like, and I know that's weird. This might be weird coming from somebody that has spent the entire second half of the year praising Once Upon a Time in Hollywood as one of the best movies of the decade. If not the best movie of the decade. And now I'm saying that giving some sort of alternate story to the Sharon Tate murders is morally wrong. Well, for starters, obviously Tarantino had the full-on blessing of Sharon Tate's sister, to the point that she even gave Margot Robbie some of the jewelry to wear in the movie. This is the kind of stuff that the family doesn't approve of. Like, they even had David Duchovny's show Aquarius canceled because they thought it was a little too much. And this, I don't even want to know their opinion on this. I'm sure it's no different than the opinion of the Belushi family when they saw Wired. Only this is probably significantly more offensive. Believe it or not. And the approaches that they take with this, making it some shitty horror movie, adding in some sort of supernatural element where it's like Sharon Tate, like, knew her death was coming because of premonitions, which is apparently based on one throwaway thing she said in an interview once about how, like, I had a dream about my death or something. And they've turned it into this whole supernatural, straight-to-video, flashy shit with, like, jump scares and shit. It's just don't even give it the time of day. Like I said, I did do like a review on it, so I went into the details there, but let's just not even give it the time of day anymore. So the worst movie of the year, I think, you have to go all the way towards the beginning of the year, and this movie always stuck with me. It's like when people were saying, like, so what's, some of the worst stuff that's come out this year? This was always the first movie that popped in my head. And it's been there all fucking year. And that is a movie that Netflix put out called Polar, which stars Mads Mikkelsen as a hitman who decides he wants to lay low for a while, but he's also stuck in a graphic novel. Apparently it's based on a graphic novel. Novel that I wouldn't want to judge the quality of based on this movie, but every time they try to do the graphic novel thing, this movie becomes a full-on disaster and a complete and total tonal mess. Because they're trying to go back and forth between being this really... there's the beginning scene of the movie. This is the kind of movie that it is. This is it showing you how over the top and crazy it is. After they've killed some people, I think Johnny Knoxville actually plays the first victim. The killers start singing September by Earth, Wind and Fire, and while they're singing, the words come up on the screen with a bouncing ball. And it's like, oh, it's this lighthearted stuff, but it's also violent and graphic, and also comedic. Aren't we edgy? And that's basically what the whole movie is them trying so hard. I haven't seen a movie this fucking try hard in a while. And there's a lot of try hard bullshit out there, especially lately, but this is like at the very top of that bullshit totem pole. And this movie feels like I mean, Mickelson more or less comes out unscathed because he's just kind of untouchable. He's so awesome, he's untouchable, just in general, as an actor and a badass. But everybody else in this movie, from Vanessa Hudgens to Matt Lucas to Catherine Winnick, I think, it's like the makers of the movie were trying to humiliate the cast on purpose. I'm offended on their behalf. That's one time I feel comfortable saying something like that. Watching this movie, I feel offended for the people that are in it, and I know they said yes. I know it's their fault, but I mean, I know they read this shit. I know they saw the director's other movies like fucking Spun, but I know Spun has a cult following, but it's not for me, and obviously neither is this. And so they're trying so hard to be edgy and cool, especially with this group of assassins. They're trying to be, like, smoking aces, but also, like, in the style of, like, Crank. You know, Nelly and Taylor, the guys that did Crank and Gamer and all that. They're trying to do that, and they're failing miserably. There's, you know, shit jokes and boner jokes. And then we cut back to Mickelson, who's in an entirely different movie with Vanessa Hudgens, because they're real seeking out the best of the best to go up against Mickelson, and have the you know, pre-title credit for it with him, and yeah, and that's basically what the movie is them trying to kill people in graphic ways, trying to be as over the top as possible. And in another world, maybe with Neville Dean and Taylor, this would work. The whole contrast of this is their world, and it's all comic booky and try-hard and edgy and neon colored, and then you got Mickelson over here in like a cabin in the snow and all that. But it keeps cutting back and forth, and the more it cuts back and forth, the less you see a contrast, and the more you see a director that doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, or knows even what the word tone is. And it's, once again, like the others I've said here, it's really just from beginning to end excruciating. Like, I tried to find, you know, points, and I feel like when I talked about it at the beginning of the year, there was like one or two things here where I was like, well, they have this going for them, but still this overpowered. I don't even remember what the good things are now, if there even is any at all. Except Mickelson's presence, but I mean, even that's going to be overshadowed by the movie when it's like, when you're trying to put those two tones together. The shit, given how shit that it is going to absolutely positively overpower anything else. And that's how I come away from this movie, is only remembering it as absolute, complete, and total try-hard dog shit and nothing else. So, with no redeemable qualities whatsoever, and like I said, when somebody asks me what some of the worst shit I've seen lately is, it's always the first one there in my head. So, there it is. So, now that that's out of the way, next week I'll be seeing and talking about 1917, Just Mercy, and potentially The Aeronauts. And then we're going to do the best of the year, which will be much more fun. And I will eventually get back to Versus. I already know what the next Versus is going to be. It's just with all the award stuff being crammed so close together, God knows when that is, but it's just somewhere randomly in this month. One will probably pop up or something. So if you're into that, so I think that's going to be this. So until all that other stuff, I think that's it.